Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the noise of the day soften into the background. In this quiet space, I invite you to listen, not with urgency, but with curiosity. Today, we will explore a delicate question, one that touches many hearts, quietly, without being spoken aloud. Why a husband may lose desire for his wife, and what lies hidden beneath this shift. This is not a story of blame, nor of judgment, but of gentle discovery. Like walking through an old garden, we will pause at each corner, noticing what may have been overlooked, and perhaps finding new paths of understanding. Let us begin with something very simple, something we often forget when we are caught in the middle of our lives, the way familiarity quietly reshapes what once felt rare and extraordinary. When two people first meet, there is a freshness in every glance, every touch, every word. Even silence feels alive, because it is filled with the mystery of the unknown. In the beginning, a husband might look at his wife and feel as though he is discovering something for the very first time, like a traveler stepping into a new land. There is a spark in those moments, a kind of electricity that dances in the air, without needing to be named. But over time, as life builds its patterns around us, that spark does not vanish. It simply changes its form. It becomes woven into the fabric of daily living, and sometimes that fabric, though comforting, can make it harder to notice the shimmer that was once so obvious. Many women notice this change quietly. They sense that their husband does not look at them with the same depth, or they feel that his mind has wandered elsewhere. He may seem distracted during conversations, or absorbed in his work, or tired in ways that seem deeper than just physical. At first, it may be brushed aside. He is just busy. He is just stressed. But as days turn into months, the absence of desire begins to feel heavier, and a question begins to form in the heart. Why has he stopped longing for me the way he once did? Psychology helps us to see that this is not an unusual story. In fact, it is part of the rhythm of human intimacy. Desire, like all feelings, does not stay frozen in time. It ebbs and flows. It shifts with seasons. It adapts to the circumstances of life. Philosophers have long reflected on this, reminding us that longing is not only about closeness, but also about the distance that allows mystery to remain. When everything becomes familiar, when each routine is known and each conversation feels predictable, the longing that once thrived on novelty can fade. This is not a failure of love. It is simply the way the human psyche responds to repetition. Imagine an old candle. When first lit, its flame is bright, casting shadows that dance across the walls. But as the candle burns for hours, the flame does not disappear. It simply softens. The light is still there, yet it no longer flickers with the same intensity. This is how desire often works in long relationships. The flame of love has not gone out, but its brightness shifts into something gentler, more familiar, and sometimes less noticeable. A wife may look for the passion of the early days and miss the quieter warmth that has taken its place. Part of this shift also comes from the pressures of life itself. In the early days of romance, the world seems to pause for the couple. Time stretches, and there is space for lingering. But as years move on, responsibilities accumulate, work becomes heavier, children may arrive, and household demands multiply. Desire does not vanish, but it can get buried beneath the weight of daily life. What once felt effortless now requires attention, and when that attention is not given, the desire feels as though it has slipped away. There is also another truth, quieter and less often spoken. Sometimes when a man stops desiring his wife, it is not because of her at all, it is because of himself. He may be carrying unspoken worries about his career, his role as a provider, his physical health, or his aging body. He may feel pressures he does not put into words, fears that make him withdraw rather than reach out. For a woman, this silence may feel like rejection, but often it is not rejection at all. It is retreat. A husband who appears distant may not be less in love, but simply overwhelmed by the unseen burdens he holds within. In many ways, this speaks to a fundamental pattern of the human mind. We rarely see each other as we are. We see each other through the mirror of our own state of being. If that mirror is clouded with stress, fatigue, or insecurity, then even beauty and kindness can feel far away. This is why a wife may continue to offer affection, presence, and care, yet her husband responds with less desire. The issue is not her worthiness or attractiveness. It is that his own inner mirror is not clear. Psychology calls this projection, but in daily life it feels like distance. We might pause here and look at history for a moment. In old traditions, couples understood that the passage of time changes intimacy. Many cultures even had rituals to honor these changes. In certain ancient societies, it was common for partners to periodically take time apart to let absence restore curiosity and longing. In others, simple daily customs, sharing tea, walking at sunset, sitting by a fire, were seen as essential to keeping desire alive. They knew that passion was not a constant flame, but a rhythm, and they learned to tend to it with patience rather than expectation. In our modern world, we often forget this wisdom. We expect desire to remain the same forever, untouched by time or circumstance. When it shifts, we panic, as though something is broken, but perhaps nothing is broken. Perhaps it is simply a rhythm we do not yet know how to listen to. Think of a garden. In spring, the blossoms are bright and fragrant, and we notice them easily. In summer, the leaves grow thick, and the air is heavy with life. In autumn, the colors change, subtle and beautiful in their fading, and in winter, the garden rests, bare and quiet, yet alive beneath the soil. Desire is like this. It has its seasons. To expect the blossoms of spring in the stillness of winter is to miss the deeper truth that even in the quiet, life remains. A husband's fading desire does not always mean the end of love. It may mean that the relationship has entered another season, one that asks for new ways of seeing, new ways of connecting, new ways of noticing the quiet forms of intimacy that are easily overlooked. In the end, what feels like the fading of desire is often an invitation to look not only at the other, but also at ourselves, to notice how life has shifted around us, how stress and routine have reshaped our days, how unspoken worries or forgotten rituals have created distance. It is in this noticing, this gentle attention, that understanding begins, and it is in understanding that the path to renewal quietly opens. Beneath the quiet surface of a relationship, there are often forces at play that neither partner fully names. These forces are not dramatic, not always obvious, but they shape the way two people experience one another. When a husband begins to lose desire, it is tempting to think the reason lies only in what he sees or does not see in his wife. But psychology teaches us that much of desire is not directed outward at all. It lives inside the one who feels it. It is formed by memories, by stress, by self-image, by hidden fears, and by the way a person relates to themselves in silence. What looks like disinterest in a partner is often the reflection of disconnection within. The human psyche is a layered thing. On the surface, there are thoughts and explanations that we can put into words. A man may say he is tired, that work is overwhelming, or that he simply does not feel in the mood. But beneath those explanations are deeper variables, what some philosophers call the hidden currents of the mind. These are not always accessible, even to the person themselves. They emerge in dreams, in subtle reactions, in the way one avoids eye contact, or turns inward at the end of the day. A husband may not consciously realize that his loss of desire is connected to a quiet worry about his role as a provider, or a fear of not being enough, or even the changes he sees in his own body over time. Yet these unseen variables are powerful, and they shape how he experiences intimacy. Consider the way stress works on the body. From the outside, stress looks like busyness, a full schedule, or fatigue. But inside, stress activates the nervous system in ways that affect both mood and desire. When the body is in a constant state of tension, it does not easily open to softness, to longing, to play. It becomes oriented towards survival, toward efficiency, toward getting through the day. For a wife, this may feel like her husband is choosing work or distraction over her. For him, it may feel like he has lost the energy to meet her in the space of intimacy, even if he cannot explain why. The hidden variable here is not a lack of attraction, but the quiet takeover of stress on the body and mind. In the history of philosophy, there is an old saying that we do not see others as they are, we see them as we are. This truth becomes especially clear in relationships. A husband who feels insecure within himself may withdraw from his wife, not because she has become less attractive, but because he no longer feels capable of being the man he wants to be in her presence. If he looks in the mirror and sees aging lines, or feels the weight of a slowing body, or silently compares himself to the younger man he once was, then his withdrawal may have more to do with his reflection than with his wife. In such moments, desire does not disappear because of the other. It dims because the self is clouded with doubt. Sometimes the hidden variables are emotional rather than physical. A man may carry unspoken grief from earlier in life, unresolved disappointments, or a sense of failure that has never been shared aloud. These emotions take up space inside, leaving little room for desire to move freely. The mind, when preoccupied with unhealed sorrow or self-criticism, cannot easily open to intimacy, and because men are often taught to hide these emotions rather than express them, their wives are left to interpret the silence without knowing the weight that lies beneath. This creates distance that feels personal, even though its roots are hidden in the private chambers of his psyche. There is also the role of routine, which shapes desire more subtly than we realize. When life falls into predictable patterns, the mind begins to operate on autopilot. A husband may go to work, return home, follow the same sequence of activities, and end the day in the same way, night after night. While routine can bring stability, it also dulls the edges of attention. The psyche begins to move through life without noticing the details that once awakened desire. The familiar no longer feels alive, not because it has lost value, but because it has lost novelty. This is another hidden variable, the mind's deep connection to curiosity. Desire often requires the spark of the unexpected, and when everything feels known, that spark fades. In older cultures, people understood this in ways that modern life often overlooks. There were traditions designed to interrupt routine, to reawaken curiosity. Couples might spend time apart intentionally, or engage in rituals that marked transitions in life, reminding each other of the mystery still present between them. Without such rituals, routine becomes heavy, and desire folds quietly into the background. What looks like disinterest is often the natural result of a life too predictable, too crowded with responsibility, too emptied of surprise. Another hidden variable comes from the expectations surrounding masculinity. Many men grow up with the belief that they must always be strong, always capable, always in control. When they struggle, When they feel weak or uncertain, they often turn inward, fearing judgment or rejection. In marriage, this can appear as withdrawal, as though the man has lost interest. But inside, the truth is often that he does not want to expose his vulnerability. Desire requires openness, and openness requires a sense of safety. If he does not feel safe to reveal his worries, he may close the door to intimacy altogether. Psychology reminds us that desire is not only physical, but deeply tied to identity. A husband who feels his identity slipping through career changes, financial strain, or simply the passage of time, may lose touch with the parts of himself that once reached out eagerly for his wife. It is not her presence that has changed, but his own relationship with himself. If he no longer feels alive in his own skin, then the channel of desire, which flows through selfhood, becomes blocked. Even subtle cultural narratives influence this shift. Many societies paint a picture of love and intimacy that is always vibrant, always intense, always new. When reality does not match this story, men may quietly feel they are failing, and that sense of failure can turn into avoidance. Rather than admitting confusion or disappointment, they step back, leaving their wives to wonder what went wrong. The hidden variable here is not lack of love, but the gap between expectation and reality, a gap that is rarely spoken of, yet quietly powerful. It is important to see these hidden layers with gentle eyes. A wife may feel hurt, rejected, or unseen, but beneath her husband's distance, there are often unspoken battles being fought in silence. Stress, insecurity, routine, unhealed emotion, cultural pressure, all of these weave together in the tapestry of his inner life. He may not even be aware of how these forces are shaping his behavior. To understand this is not to excuse the distance, but to recognize that desire does not simply vanish. It becomes entangled in the deeper variables of the human psyche. Throughout history, people have sought ways to keep closeness alive, not through grand gestures or dramatic changes, but through the slow, steady rhythms of daily life. When we think about intimacy today, we often imagine it as something large, an event, or a special occasion. But in earlier times, couples nurtured connection through very small, ordinary customs. They ate together at a table, not in haste, but with presence, noticing each other's gestures, listening to each other's words. They walked at dusk, when the world was quieter and distractions were few, allowing conversation to wander softly from one subject to another. They told stories before sleep, sometimes of their day, sometimes of their childhood, sometimes of things that lived only in imagination. These simple rituals carried a deep meaning because they reminded each partner of the humanity of the other, of the mystery that still lingered beneath familiarity. In our modern lives, these customs have slowly faded away. Meals are often rushed, eaten in front of screens, or scattered between tasks. Evenings are filled with devices that light up the room but leave little space for true presence. Walks are replaced by commutes, and conversations are interrupted by the constant pull of notifications. Without even noticing, many couples let go of these old, grounding habits, and with their disappearance, intimacy begins to lose its thread. What once was renewed each day through ritual now fades into routine. A husband may not consciously think that he desires his wife less because the customs are missing, but desire is a delicate thing, and it lives in the atmosphere created by these small acts of attention. Psychology helps us understand why these rituals matter so much. Intimacy is not only about physical closeness, but about the psychological space two people create together. When a couple engages in rituals, whether eating together, sharing stories, or simply sitting side by side, they reinforce the sense of being attuned to one another. This attunement builds emotional safety, and emotional safety allows desire to grow. Without it, partners may still share a house, still sleep in the same bed, still fulfill responsibilities together, but the deeper thread of intimacy becomes thinner, less resilient. Over time, it is not unusual for a husband to feel more like a companion in duty than a lover in desire. The missing link is not passion itself, but the daily attention that sustains passion quietly in the background. There is a kind of paradox here. We often think of desire as something that thrives on excitement, surprise, and novelty. And while this is true, desire also thrives on attention and presence. The very act of slowing down, of noticing the small details, of pausing long enough to listen fully, has a powerful effect. When couples once shared the ritual of evening tea, for example, it was not the tea itself that created intimacy. It was the quiet space carved out in which presence became possible. In that presence, curiosity could be renewed, and in curiosity, desire found room to breathe. Without these kinds of pauses, life becomes a blur of tasks, and desire has little space in which to live. If we look to history, we can see how strongly people valued these rituals. In many traditional households, there was an emphasis on the daily meal, not as fuel, but as a sacred gathering. Stories were exchanged, laughter was shared, even disagreements became part of the living bond. These customs acted as anchors, holding relationships steady amidst the changes of the outside world. In modern society, where life is faster and distractions are constant, these anchors are often lost, and with them, the sense of grounding that intimacy depends on. What remains are fragments, quick greetings, short conversations, moments of physical closeness that feel hurried rather than savored. Over time, this fragmentation leaves a space where desire once easily dwelled. There is also an overlooked truth in the way desire connects to memory. When couples share rituals, they create a string of small memories that link them together. A certain walk, a favorite meal, a quiet moment repeated again and again. These become threads of memory woven through daily life. Desire feeds on memory as much as on novelty. It remembers what it feels like to be seen, to be chosen, to be invited into presence. When these memories are no longer being created, desire has less to draw upon, and what once felt abundant begins to feel scarce. The human psyche is highly responsive to attention. When a husband no longer engages in rituals of closeness, his own mind begins to shift. He becomes less practiced at noticing his wife's expressions, her changing moods, the subtleties of her presence. Desire does not flourish in inattention. It requires noticing. Without the rituals that bring his awareness back to her, he may find himself feeling distant, not because his attraction has gone, but because the channels of attention have closed. This lack of noticing is often felt by the wife as rejection, yet on a deeper level, it is the quiet erosion of habits that once kept his awareness alive. Consider how many relationships begin with a heightened sense of attention. A man notices the way a woman laughs, the way she pauses before answering, the way her presence feels in a room. This noticing is the root of desire. Over time, however, when daily routines take over, that careful attention fades, replaced by the familiarity of assumption. Rituals act as a remedy for this. They force the mind to pause, to notice again, to step out of assumption and into presence. Without them, the psyche settles into autopilot, and autopilot is rarely fertile ground for intimacy. It is worth remembering that in some cultures, rituals of intimacy were considered as important as rituals of survival. Just as food and shelter were necessary for the body, shared customs were seen as necessary for the relationship. They were not luxuries but essentials. The modern tendency to dismiss such habits as unimportant overlooks the psychological truth that intimacy requires maintenance, not only in moments of crisis, but in the small moments of everyday life. When a husband loses desire, it is often because this maintenance has quietly slipped away. Technology, while offering many conveniences, also contributes to this loss. Screens fill the spaces where rituals once lived. The glow of a phone replaces the glow of candlelight, and scrolling replaces storytelling. Couples may sit in the same room, but inhabit different worlds. This separation does not always appear dramatic, but it quietly eats away at the shared space where desire grows. What once was a moment of presence becomes a moment of absence. Even while physically together, the psychological impact is significant, as desire depends on the sense of being chosen, of being prioritized, of being the focus of attention. Without rituals to draw partners back into shared space, that sense of being chosen fades. Rituals also carry symbolic weight. A small act, like pouring a cup of tea for someone, can carry the message, "I see you, I care for you, I am here with you." These messages may seem subtle, but they are powerful to the psyche. Over time, they build a foundation of trust and connection. When such acts are lost, the symbolic messages are lost too, and with them, the subtle reassurance that intimacy is still alive. A husband who no longer engages in these small acts may not realize the impact, but his wife feels it in the quiet absence of recognition. The forgetting of customs is not only about neglect, it is about the speed of modern life. Days are structured around efficiency, productivity, and goals, leaving little room for slowness. Yet, desire rarely lives in speed. It lives in pauses, in attention, in unhurried presence. Without space for slowness, desire suffocates. A husband caught in the rhythm of modern busyness may feel too tired to engage, too distracted to notice, too overwhelmed to slow down. His wife, in turn, feels unseen. The loss of rituals creates a feedback loop where both partners withdraw and desire quietly diminishes. If we think of intimacy as a fire, then rituals are the small pieces of wood placed steadily to keep it burning. Without them, the fire does not extinguish immediately, but it weakens. The warmth becomes less noticeable, the glow less bright. What was once central to life together begins to retreat into the background. A husband's loss of desire, in this sense, is not simply a matter of fading passion, but the natural outcome of a fire that has not been tended. The wood is missing, and the flame cannot feed itself. In reflecting on this, it becomes clear that the forgotten customs of intimacy are not minor details. They are the very framework through which desire is sustained over time. Without them, the psychological space of the relationship narrows, leaving little room for curiosity, for noticing, for the quiet acts that keep closeness alive. And as they fade, so too does the thread of desire, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a slow drifting away, almost imperceptible until it is deeply felt. When desire seems to have faded, it is easy to believe it has gone forever, as though something once precious has been lost with no way of return. Yet psychology and philosophy both remind us that human connection is not static, and what feels absent today may return tomorrow under different conditions. Desire is not a fixed possession, but a living process. And like all living things, it responds to care, attention, and time. The psyche is never a closed book. It is more like a garden, and even when it looks bare in winter, there are seeds resting beneath the soil, waiting for warmth and nourishment. To understand renewal, It helps to release the idea that passion must always look the same. In the early stages of a relationship, desire is often fueled by novelty, by the thrill of discovery, by the mystery of the unknown. Years later, when a husband seems less drawn to his wife, it may simply be that desire is searching for a new form, one that fits the changing seasons of their lives. Philosophy often speaks of love as a cycle, not a straight line. Just as nature teaches us that after every autumn comes spring, relationships remind us that what feels like loss may actually be transition. A husband's silence, his withdrawal, his fading spark. These may be signs not of an ending, but of a shift, an invitation to see intimacy differently. Psychology offers us another insight. Desire does not return through pressure or demand. If a wife confronts her husband with anger or desperation, asking why he no longer desires her, the walls between them often grow higher. Desire is not something that can be forced into being. It thrives instead in the soft soil of curiosity and openness. A more fruitful approach begins with gentle awareness, to look again at one another, not as roles or as fixed identities, but as human beings who are always changing. A wife may begin to ask not only why her husband seems distant, but also what brings him alive now, what occupies his inner world, what makes him feel most himself in this season of life. These questions open doors, not only for him, but for her as well, as both partners begin to rediscover each other beyond the routines that have narrowed their attention. There is also a profound truth in the idea that curiosity itself can be medicine. Many couples fall into the trap of believing they already know everything about each other. After years of shared life, the mind stops asking. It stops listening with the freshness of the early days. Yet no person is ever fully known, not even by their closest companion. Each of us carries inner landscapes that continue to shift. New fears, new dreams, new ways of seeing the world. When curiosity reawakens, when one partner begins to ask open, gentle questions, desire can stir again, not because something entirely new has arrived, but because the sense of discovery has returned. Philosophy often reminds us that renewal is not about returning to the past, but about reimagining the present. A husband who once desired his wife with urgency may not feel that same fire now, but he may discover a quieter, deeper form of longing if both partners create space for it. This could mean reintroducing small rituals, carving out unhurried moments, or simply learning to be fully present again in each other's company. Renewal does not require dramatic change. It often begins with something as simple as putting away distractions during a meal, making eye contact without hurry, or sharing a walk without purpose other than being together. These gestures, while modest, rebuild the psychological conditions where desire can take root again. The path of renewal also involves recognizing that desire and hardship are often intertwined. When life is heavy with responsibility, when financial pressures, parenting duties, or career struggles weigh on a man's shoulders, his capacity for desire can shrink. It is not that love has left him, but that survival instincts take priority, leaving little room for intimacy. A wife who understands this may see his withdrawal not as rejection, but as exhaustion, and when that exhaustion is met with compassion rather than blame, space opens for connection to return. The psyche softens in the presence of understanding, and in that softness, desire has a chance to awaken. In many traditions, it was believed that love required tending, just as fields required cultivation. Left unattended, fields grow wild or barren, but with steady care, they produce harvest again and again. Relationships follow the same pattern. Renewal does not happen overnight. It is the slow work of attention, of patience, of noticing the subtle changes in one another and responding to them with care. This does not mean that a wife must carry the burden alone, but that both partners have a role in tending to the space between them. Desire is not just his or hers, it belongs to the relationship itself, and it flourishes when both are willing to give it care. Philosophy also teaches us that hardship itself can be a doorway. What feels like loss can awaken reflection. Reflection can awaken awareness, and awareness can awaken new ways of living. A wife who feels the sting of her husband's fading desire may find, through reflection, new depths of understanding, not only about him, but about herself. She may ask what she has overlooked in her own needs, what parts of herself she has neglected, what desires she has silenced in the rhythm of daily life. Renewal often begins, not only with the partner, but with the self. When one person begins to rediscover their own aliveness, that energy can inspire and invite the other back into closeness. In psychology, there is the idea that relationships are systems, and when one part of the system shifts, the whole begins to change. If a wife introduces new curiosity, new presence, new self-awareness, the husband is likely to respond. Consciously or unconsciously, the system reorganizes around the new energy. This does not guarantee a specific outcome, but it creates conditions where something new can emerge. And in that emergence, desire has a chance to take on new forms appropriate to the current season of life, rather than a repetition of the past. Renewal also asks for patience with silence. Sometimes the soil must lie still before seeds can sprout. A husband's distance may take time to soften. His inner struggles may need space to unfold. In these moments, the temptation is to push, to demand answers, to force closeness. Yet, often the most effective path is gentler, creating an atmosphere where he feels safe to step forward in his own time. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means preparation, the slow work of the psyche reshaping itself beneath the surface. If we think again of the metaphor of seasons, winter often feels endless. When we are inside it, the trees look bare, the ground seems hard, the air feels cold, yet beneath the surface, life is still moving. Roots are still alive, seeds are still waiting, the earth is still preparing for spring. Relationships too go through winters of desire. To see this not as death, but as dormancy, is to find hope in the midst of difficulty. Renewal is possible because life by its nature moves in cycles, and love is part of that cycle. The deepest renewal may come not from trying to recreate what once was, but from embracing what is now. A husband and wife are not the same as when they first met. They have aged, grown, faced hardships, shared joys, and changed in countless ways. Desire too must change to match who they have become. It may be softer, quieter, more spacious. It may live less in urgency and more in presence, but it can still be deeply alive, deeply nourishing, if both partners are willing to see it as something to be cultivated, not something that simply arrives on its own. In this way, what feels like a loss can become an invitation, a call to slow down, to notice, to care, to rediscover not only each other, but also the hidden rhythms of the human heart. Renewal begins with awareness, is sustained by curiosity, and blossoms in the gentle patience of presence. And though hardships may shape the path, they do not close it. They remind us instead that even in the quietest moments, the possibility of desire remains, waiting for the right conditions to return.